No problem. Okay, so let me know if you can see.
Yep.
Awesome. I'm just going to go into present. And if you guys have any questions during it, I can't, all I can see right now is my screen. And so I can't see if you like raise your hand or anything, but if you want to interrupt, like I want this to be interactive because I mean, the best way in my experience to learn is for things to be more interactive and experiential rather than someone just, giving you a bunch of information. But that said, today we are going to talk about the importance of accepting feedback and what to do with it. So just really brief outline. We're going to define what feedback is and how it's given. We're going to go through the different types of feedback. So we'll go into it, but there's verbal, there's written, there's different types of peers that you can get feedback from. We're going to go into who can give it, why it's important, how to receive it, which is really the most important thing, especially in the beginning of your career. And so once you receive feedback, what do you do with that? Should you just blindly accept it? Is it good to question things sometimes? We'll go a little bit into that. What is feedback? So I'll give you the textbook definition that we've got written here, and then I'll say in my terms what I think feedback is. So information about reactions to a person's work performance, which is used as a basis for praise, the need for improvement, and or the tracking of progress. And to me, feedback is simply the communication of like one person to another person or a group of people about their experience of how the work has been done so far in a professional context. So it might be your supervisor telling you that you did a fantastic job. And I would say the best feedback is specific feedback. So instead of a broad strokes, you did a good job, it might be, you did a really good job on this tax work paper. This was a very tricky thing that you worked through. And it was well above what was expected of you at your level. So that's at a general definition, what feedback is. How is feedback given? So I alluded to this in the very beginning, but there's different types of feedback. So one would be verbal, meetings that are, it doesn't have to be meetings, but verbal feedback usually comes from setting aside maybe a half hour or an hour. It could be shorter, it could be 10, 15 minutes. And just walking through like, how am I doing on this engagement? How have I been this past year? Checking in on goals is another thing that feedback or verbal feedback is given on. So at Bonadio, we at least once every quarter, I would say, we set goals for the year and then we check in on those goals. Are we on track? Are we behind our goals? What's getting in the way of that? If we're off track, like how can we course correct it? So that's what verbal feedback might look like. It's setting up a meeting and then going over some sort of agreed upon topic. Written feedback is exactly what it sounds like. It would be email correspondence or some sort of like giving more time to reflect on what the feedback is instead of it being face to face. So a lot of times in the heat of a moment, we might not be prepared for everything that we want to say. And so written feedback could be a good alternative. It might even be a precursor or a prerequisite for verbal feedback. If you like get an email with a bunch of feedback, it might be helpful to schedule a call to discuss that after. 360-degree evaluations, I'm not sure if you're familiar with, but that involves getting feedback from the whole gamut of people that you're working with. So that would include the direct report, your supervisor, or it might even be the partner, someone that you're not reporting directly to, but that is seeing your work. The manager would be a direct report. And then it can even come from people that you're working with that are on the same level as you. And I would even add that someone below you can give you feedback. I mean, one of the best ways that I've grown as a manager is to see like, how have I been helpful in helping my associate or senior associate learn? And that's an important way. So learning always goes, it doesn't have to go only upwards. It can go all across the chain. Progress check-ins are like verbal and written can fall within progress check-ins, but it's helpful. A lot of times it falls through the cracks where it's like Bonadio would give us once every 6 months that we need to give feedback, or it might even slip through the cracks further than that. It's helpful to, in addition to like a more formal setting, to have check-ins where you're just seeing how it's going. And it shows, especially as you get started, if you're an intern or associate, it really reflects well on you if you're initiating those check-ins to see like, how am I doing? And asking someone that. It shows a strong initiative and a desire to grow. And then at Bonadio, we do ampersand. So ampersand is what kind of our like homepage that if we open an internet browser, that's where it takes us. And it has a bunch of company news on it. And one of the things that's on the news is the company shout outs for ways of recognizing. So we can submit, if someone did a really good job, we want to recognize them for that job. So yeah, it's important when someone's doing a good job. I think we all like to be recognized for the job that we're doing. So does anyone have questions on what feedback is or how feedback is given? And if you do, feel free to put it in the chat, or you can speak. I won't be able to see you, but. I'll give it another 5 seconds, and if there's nothing, then I will move forward. Okay, so this is something that we've touched on a little bit so far, but there's multiple types of feedback. You can get positive feedback, recognition for what you've been doing well. And I have a resistance to the word negative, but I'll say negative and constructive kind of go hand in hand to me. It's what could be done better, or how could we improve? And even in terms of positive feedback, you might get constructive on what was already great about this. How can we do it even better next time? And in accounting, it's really, we're very process driven industry. So a lot of times things are going well and we want to see inefficiencies. How can we do it even better the following year? And if it comes to giving tougher feedback, that's important too. I remember in my first job, I was a manager at my first job as well, and we had an employee who was getting promoted to senior associate, and he was kind of functioning at a lower than senior associate level. I put it really mildly and nicely. And it's important to have those tough discussions, but it's also important to phrase it in a way that's not attacking or making the other person defensive. I wanted to say it from a place of, I can see that you're working really hard, and here are some areas that we expect you to be taking more initiative on and improving. So even with negative or constructive feedback, you wanna make it so that the other person is going to receive it. And especially in the beginning of your career, as you're on the receiving end, we'll get into this more later in the presentation, but you want to try and understand that person wants you to succeed as well. They want you to be doing a good job because it helps them succeed and it helps you succeed. So there's a synergy there. We're all part of the same team, and we don't want to be giving tough or constructive feedback. It's meant to be helpful. So I just wanted to throw that in there. We'll pick back up on that later. It could be formal or informal. So it could be something that is Bonadio mandated, and it's part of your performance review, and so, any big company goes through that process. But it can be informal, where maybe you would find it helpful to check in with your supervisor on a weekly or somewhat regular basis. I think that's really helpful. I mean, getting feedback after all the work has been done it kind of delays the project, right? You could have been learning on the fly how to be better during the engagement. And two, a lot of times when we're not in the heat of the moment, we don't even realize what we're getting the feedback for. So like catching it in the moment is a really helpful way to give and receive feedback. There's peer-to-peer. So that would be someone that's on your level. If you're comfortable enough, you can initiate that. And I would say permission-based, right? You don't want to give feedback to someone that's your peer unless they're asking for it. Or if you say, hey, I noticed something, would you be open to feedback? That could be a nice, gentle way to introduce it. There's employer to employee, which is supervisor to employee. And then the remaining types are more just the styles of doing it instead of structure. So it could be appreciative, supportive. Coaching would be more from the lens of like, if I am coaching someone, I want to know, what do you want the feedback on, and how can we help you reach those goals? Like, what are the goals that you're setting and how can we get you there? And then evaluation is more of the formal review of maybe a project that you work on or an engagement. And the short answer to who can give feedback is it's really anyone. It just depends on, you want to set the right container for the feedback to happen. So if you are a peer and you are just blurting something, or if you are an associate or intern and you're blurting out something to a partner unsolicited, might not be the best strategy, but anyone can give feedback as long as the, I guess, parameters are set correctly. And yeah, we listed out all the different positions here. Why is feedback important? Well, we listed out a bunch of different reasons here, and the short and really simple answer is, as professionals, we want to get better at our job. I mean, plain and simple. I think it's easy to fall into the trap of resisting feedback because it can be tough to hear. Like, I still to this day, I don't know if it'll ever go away. I don't want to be told if I was doing a substandard job, and it always hurts a little. I could kind of even feel like a clenching in my chest or my stomach if someone is telling me a way that I can improve. But I just remind myself it's going to help me grow and be better as a person and as an employee. And I think that's ultimately the goal. I mean, it can feel comfortable to just keep running through the motions, but at the end of the day, we all have, I think, an innate desire to grow and to improve. So that might show up in all these different ways that we list here. So it's important for motivation. It's important to improve and in your development. It's also important because we're all part of a team. At Bonadio, a lot of times we're on a small team. So there's I might be working with one partner on an engagement, and that's a small team. But then there's the whole tax team, and then there's the whole New York City office, and then there's all of Bonadio. And so even if you take a giant company that's not Bonadio, like Amazon, if you bracket it all down, like everyone's working in some sort of small team where their work is directly impacting the people around them. And if we can create that ripple effect where we're all seeking feedback, we're all trying to get better, we're all communicating really effectively with each other, it creates a synergy where we have a really strong culture. And that's one of the things that Bonadio prides itself on. We have a really strong culture and open, honest communication where we hold each other accountable, but we do it in a kind way. Bonadio has this thing called a no jerk policy. And so, yeah, that means that we're not really mean to each other. But that being said, we also have a standard of excellence. And so holding those two things in harmony is really important. And feedback is an integral part of that. And then I would say the word that stands out to me towards the bottom is empowerment. I mean, in a lot of ways, we can become the best version of ourselves if we are getting and receiving feedback. And also if we're giving feedback, it creates these kind of exponential effects where the team, you're growing, the team's growing, and then it ripples like I was talking about. Any questions on the last two slides, or do you want me to just keep plowing through?
Good.
Okay. So now that we've gone over why feedback's important, what it is, how do we accept feedback? So the bottom one is actually what I want to start with. I love API, assume positive intent, or assume positive intentions. And a lot of times in the heat of a moment, accounting and tax and audit in particular, very deadline driven. And so this time of year, it can, tempers might flare sometimes, or it can be it can be hard to take the time to slow down and be really mindful of how the words are coming out of your mouth. And when someone says something that is that doesn't sit right with you, I always maybe take a step back and I say, they actually want what's best for me at the end of the day, because that's what's best for them. And so assuming positive intentions from your clients, from your supervisors, from your peers, 99.99999% of people, I think, really mean well. And it helps develop empathy for the other person if you can just assume positive intentions. I mean, we all have tough days and aren't our best in any given moment sometimes. So that goes hand in hand to me with being open-minded. Be as open-minded as possible. So a closed-minded approach might be being committed to being right, like saying, no matter what, I'm going to bunker down. My way is the right way. That person doesn't know. I just need to do it my way. And what makes a company great usually is that there's so many different perspectives. There's people who view the world differently than we view it, and see things that we can't possibly see. And so that's what makes a company really great. And being open-minded allows you to take maybe the strengths of a different person and learn something from them and adopt it as your own strength. And it goes both ways. You might catch things that someone else might not be able to catch, and it's really helpful to be able to stay open-minded and say, I'm doing my best and I'm doing a really great job, and I'm also incomplete. I could always be a little bit better. I touched on this a little bit earlier, but seeking it out before it finds you is really a great way to show initiative. It shows that you care and that you're invested in your development, and it always reflects well upon you to say, yeah, I want to be better. Like even if someone says you're doing a great job, you might even press them and say, how could it be even better? I know there's always room for improvement. So, what would be if you had to pick one thing, what's one thing I could improve upon? It shows a lot of confidence in yourself. And, usually it's counterintuitive maybe, but admitting that you aren't perfect and that you want to be better actually shows a lot of confidence, more than pretending that you have it all figured out all the time. The Godfather rule, it's not personal, it's business. So yeah, this kind of goes hand in hand with assuming positive intent in a kind of indirect way. But when someone tells you something, it's because they want you to improve and do a better job. I mean, they really are looking out for your best interest at the end of the day. And it's not an attack on you. It's how can we do our job better, period, stop. Listening, such an important skill. That's not just in feedback, that's in any business endeavor. If you're able to listen and take notes, and I'll pair with listening, asking questions and making sure that you get it right, because sometimes we misunderstand, or words might mean something to me or have a stronger valence than they might have with another person. So asking really clarifying questions and listening to make sure that you fully understand the other person, maybe echoing back what they said to you and say, am I understanding this correctly? That's a really great way to make sure you're on the same page with someone, instead of just assuming that you heard them and not talking about it, because that might lead to more unresolved loops that need to be closed in another conversation. So taking the time to slow down, ask questions, listen, take notes, and then regularly check in on that feedback is a really great way to keep improving, keep getting better. Let's see. Creating an action plan is a very logical next step. And so it's all well and good to say, how can I be better? But if you're not sure of how to implement that, then that's a good question to ask. So what would be, given what I've just learned, and if once you know that you understand correctly, what would be an action? What's a way that I could put this into an action plan? And yeah, I didn't touch on this, but it is okay to disagree without becoming argumentative. And so you might just reflect back, hey, I'm seeing this a little differently than you. Can I share my side of the story here? And how does that land with you after I said that? And if you are feeling that, then there's probably something there that it's helpful to just get on the table. And the person that's giving you feedback might learn something new and have a way that they can shift it. So yeah, those are all really valuable ways to accept feedback. It's really easy to fall into the trap of being defensive and closed-minded, but if you can just like really stay present to like, this person's just trying to help me and I'm going to grow from this and become better, then it's going to help you become the best employee and have a lot of success. And so I believe this is the last slide. So there's the, okay, I've gotten feedback. Now what should I do with it? So one is like, let's just take a beat, reflect, and take time for it to sink in, right? Like we've talked a little bit about how charged it can be. And when you're receiving feedback, you might be feeling, yeah, very guarded and not as open. And so take the time to reflect and remain calm, and take a step back and allow it to settle in. And once you're feeling, more, I guess, present and open and curious, then it can be more helpful to revisit at that point than when we're feeling a little defensive and guarded and maybe anxious and in fear. So I think it's important to, even if in the moment you name that to your supervisor, like this isn't really, maybe we should revisit when I'm feeling a little calmer, because right now I'm noticing I'm a little defensive. That, that could be a really helpful way for the feedback to actually be integrated and to sink in. On the other end of the spectrum, if you receive positive feedback, like, we want to celebrate that, right? We don't want to brush it off as like, oh, it's really easy to just go, oh, I'm doing my job. And so yeah, you might not think that you block yourself off from positive feedback, but sometimes we do that too. We don't allow the positive feedback to really sink in. So it's important to take that moment and go, yeah, it's awesome. I'm doing a great job. It feels really great to be recognized for that, and let that sink in too, the same way that you might let something tougher sink in. Listening and asking questions really drives home this seek clarification point. So I think it's always, if you're ever unclear and not 100% certain about something, it's always helpful to ask questions. And even if you don't do it on the spot, it might be helpful to revisit by email or set up another meeting and say, hey, there's some stuff that's unresolved here. I've reflected on it and I still have a couple of more clarifying questions. So it would be great to set up a time. And yeah, the rest is really just about putting this stuff into place. So what can I learn from this is always a useful question to ask. And then, like, how can I put this into action and keep working and growing would be the next logical step. So the last few points are really, don't take it personally. It's the Godfather rule again. So it's always be encouraged. And even if it comes out the wrong way, like, someone is really trying to help you. There's always room to grow, so let's keep looking forward. And this is what allows us to be the best possible team with the strongest culture possible. And that's really what makes Bonadio thrive, is that we're open to having these conversations with each other. And yeah, I've been part of other companies where that wasn't the case, and it becomes, that's where maybe gossip starts to happen and people feel insecure. And so when you're able to really bring whatever is present to the table, we all feel safer with each other, and we all are comfortable giving each other feedback, and we all grow together. That's what it's all about. So I'm going to stop the screen share now. We came in well ahead of time, and that was a lot of consecutive talking on my end. So I want to turn it over to you. Do you have any questions? And yeah, I'll shut up for a second.
I don't have a question, but I did definitely want to comment. I jotted a lot of stuff down because I've seen it in my own internship, how everything comes up. I mean, talk to my students instead of just nothing. So definitely, I think it's great to be able to accept the feedback and know what to do with it, because no matter where you go, no matter if you work in accounting, no matter if you work anywhere, there's always a chance that you're going to have feedback, and good or bad. So being able to take it, giving yourself a second to process it before you respond, because you might be very heated up about it, is so important. And I definitely wish that I knew that earlier in my life, but it's definitely something to keep in the back of your mind whenever you talk to anybody in the future, because it really kind of saves you.
Yeah, it's very gratifying on my end to hear that. So thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's a big part of why I'm passionate about sharing this is because I felt the same way as you. Like I looked at feedback as something that I wanted to avoid, and I still have a perfectionist part of me that just wants to do everything right, and for everyone to pat me on the back all the time and say, like there's nothing you can do better. You're already perfect. And yeah, it takes a little bit of confronting our egos and discomfort to be willing to accept feedback and know like we're not, no one's a completely finished product, and there's also nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make me a flawed or that something's wrong with me. So it's really helpful to know that. And I'm glad it sunk in with you. Thanks for sharing. Does anyone else have anything that you'd like to share? Any questions at all? It doesn't have to be feedback related either. You can ask me about Bonadio or whatever you're curious about.
Actually, Michael, I have a question.
Yeah.
So pretend you got negative feedback. You just received negative feedback from someone above you in any company you're working in. What's an example of a response you'd give back? I guess instead of just sitting there and like soaking in this feedback, like what's a question you'd ask in response to negative feedback?
Yeah, that's a great question. So one of the things that I'm noticing right now is that this is an area for me to improve on. So like, I don't know. It's hard for me to think of a time that I got negative feedback, and that shows something of a lack of initiative on my end to actually push people and say like, what can I really be doing better here? But I will say that, yeah, there have been times where something that comes to mind was there was a downtime in the year. I think it was a couple of years ago. I wasn't yet at Bonadio. I was at a company that merged with Bonadio. And one of the partners was frustrated with the lack of time that I was putting in. Like I wasn't billing enough time. That's an important, in accounting, the business is work client time, work billable time. And the partner said like, what's been going on? What, you haven't been billing the time that we're expecting of you. And my initial response was to take a pause, and I wanted to get defensive about it and go, it's December, it's not busy yet. Like we're about to go in busy season. I just want to relax. And what I said was, I just owned it. I said, I'm sorry, like I've been slacking a little bit. I know it's a downtime of year, but that's not really a good excuse. And I want to be better about that. And so if I have availability, I want to communicate that to you. And yeah, I think I just acknowledged that I was getting a little bit comfortable in the slower time of the year. And he really appreciated that honesty. And so that still happens from time to time. Tax is very cyclical. I can catch myself drifting off into, you deserve a break, Mike. Come on. And then just remembering, if I have some time, like I know other people are working really hard, and that's what makes me a good team member, is to step in there. So what I think might be useful from the way that happened was I just took it head on and admitted that I was doing something wrong, and I didn't try and make up a story about, the dog ate my homework type of scenario. I just went in there and acknowledged, like, you know what, you're right. It's a good call out, and I could be better. So was that helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Sure.
If I can also jump in here, hopefully my internet, everybody can hear me.
Yeah.
Yes. So I've been on both sides of it. I've had to obviously receive feedback as an employee, and also give it to people that I've been supervising. So immediately, my first job out of college, I was working at a college in an admissions office, and my very first supervisor called me in, and we talked about some of things, about my performance, and it was mostly positive. And then they ended up saying, I know you have ambitions to eventually be a director someday. You might want to think about what you're wearing to work. So as a 22-year-old who just graduated and thought, oh, I know everything and I'm doing everything right, that kind of bordered on that, oh my gosh, I'm taking it a little bit personal. You don't like my personal style, right? So I had to go home and I thought about it. And I remember I called my parents and I'm like, what am I doing wrong? I thought I was looking totally professional. And then again, I had to think about my boss is looking out for me and knows that I have these ambitions, and him kind of saying that. And it got me thinking, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to take that as constructive feedback. And I was able to make some changes. So even when it feels like it's personal, that's why in this presentation, I love, for anybody who hasn't seen The Godfather, it's a classic. It's amazing. It's got a lot of life lessons. It made me love cannolis, if any of you have seen it. But even things like that, you have to assume the positive intent when it is being told to you, no matter what it is. And I love, Michael, you were talking about just sitting with it, thinking about it, not getting defensive, because that is the automatic reaction in so many different circumstances. And that doesn't get you anywhere. And then in turn, having to give feedback, I'm thinking of a particular circumstance where, it was a lot of circumstances happening and it was not great feedback that I had to give, but I made sure to give it early enough so that changes could be made. And I think a lot of people who are supervisors who are able to give feedback, again, they don't want you to fail. They want you to be able to work on the things you can be working on. And I think when you are in turn showing that you're open to it and looking for the feedback and seeking it before it finds you, that just makes the relationship better, and the trust is there. So if they're coming to you, that you can trust that they're not just saying it to say it, they're saying it to help you. So it's tough to hear it, but I think just being open and enthusiastic for the feedback, it comes, I think, with age sometimes, where you're going to be comfortable with hearing, all right, I worked really hard on that project, and yet there were still some things I could have done differently. But having just coordinated our orientation programs with an amazing team, we still were getting feedback where we thought we did this great job. And then, oh, right, okay, we can do that even better next time. So that's just the attitude to keep, no matter what the circumstances.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Rachel, for your feedback. Does anybody else have any questions for Michael? Or any comments? You guys have any?
You sure?
Yeah, I know. Everybody should have at least some kind of comment or an experience where you might have experienced this in an internship or a job where you could.
I have a question.
Yeah, sure.
So what happens when, like, for example, at my job, sometimes I have to give feedback because I supervise some people, but they don't take action upon what you give them. What's the next step that you usually take?
So what's coming to mind for me there isn't the way, right? So I'm not going to proselytize here and say that this is exactly what needs to happen. But what I'm curious about was, if I'm giving the feedback and it's not being implemented, my first go-to would be, did I communicate it clearly enough? And so I would just check back in with, this is what I asked. Was there, and not from a sarcastic place, but was there anything that I said that genuinely was not clear? And then that to me becomes you're seeking understanding from the other person. And the challenge there would be to make sure that you're not doing it from a place of judgment or contempt, or insert the negative emotion, to do it from a place of genuine curiosity, of that maybe they didn't understand what I communicated to them. And then I'd say you're on fertile ground from there to you're kind of off and running from, Joanna's actually taking time to seek understanding. Even if they did understand, they are probably more open to admit, I don't know, I was feeling a little lazy or uncomfortable, whatever it might be. So
Yeah,
ahead.
you definitely have room to grow as a supervisor by someone maybe not taking the cues or the first chance to, turn things around or make significant changes in their performance. That's going to make you an even better supervisor. You are going to have to probably do more work. If there's a performance plan that you can put in place and markers and measurements to see the improvement that you're asking for that employee, that's one of the wonderful challenges that you just become a better supervisor, even in those more challenging situations when you are supervising someone that maybe doesn't get it on that first conversation that you have. So I'm thinking of specific instances where, sometimes it was very easy and it was just a suggestion or, hey, maybe you want to look into this, and they took it and they ran with it. But then those ones that, as Michael said, after you can check in and say, was everything clear? I want to make sure you have the roadmap to success. How can I set you up for that? And if it's just still not sinking, and that's where you really have to step in even more as a supervisor to make that plan to get them where they need to be.
Thank you. Very true.
You're welcome.
I have a question. So I'm kind of asking from like the other side of feedback, like if you're the person giving the feedback. So like I was training this girl at my job and we went over like what to do like for a couple of weeks, and then I finally like had her cover a shift and she was by herself, and there was like a lot of mistakes that were made. And like in the weeks prior, I was like, is there anything you need me to review? Like, is there anything you don't understand? And then like I left and she said everything was fine. And then a bunch of things went wrong. So I'm just curious of like how to go about like not sounding like, not like rude, but like accusatory of like being like, you did all of this wrong and this is like how you're supposed to do it, but like how to say it nicely.
Yeah. It's to me, it sounds like it's the same question, just phrased more specifically than the last one, really. And there might be clarity around like, what does doing your job well or successfully look like? Like, is she clear? You said she, right?
Yeah.
So was she clear on all the things that she was to be tracking? And so like that could be a good place to start. And that's what's coming up for me is maybe instead of saying you should have, that's very rarely in my experience is that ever going to go well. But you could just talk about the markers that you look for. What is the job that you do, by the way?
So I work in a music store. So we have like 10 teachers and about 150 students. So we do all the scheduling and everything. It's basically like office management, like dealing with staffing and all that.
And what are your responsibilities and what were her responsibilities in your stead?
So basically, to be like as easy as I could, I gave her a list of like a few things she should complete by like the end of the shift. And she had like done them within the first like hour and a half, and she had like 3 or 4 hours to work, and most of them seemed just like rushed, and then it was all wrong. So I just like I'm curious to see like how to bring it up and be like, instead of being like you should have or like you did this wrong, like I don't know if that's like too accusatory or if there's like a nicer way of putting it.
So is your gentle wish for her that she went through her list a little bit more slowly and methodically?
Yeah, I just feel like if she did it like slower and like really focused more on it, that it would have been like more accurate.
Yeah. So, I mean, I could say for me, it might be is she clear on the importance of getting the details right?
Yeah, I've brought it up to her to make sure that it's like all correct, because if it's not, then it like affects all these other things. But I guess I don't know. I don't know if I should like make it more clear without sounding like rude, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Rachel, do you have anything? I see you unmuted. Go ahead.
I do. So something that I know, with Gen Z, millennials, even Gen X, me, we are not all the same. We are all different. And I think as a supervisor, as someone who is in charge of someone else and their performance, we have to make sure that we know how to best instruct them or help them to do their job. And that's going to be different for everyone. My own supervisor, we're at Bonadio, can have a 20-minute meeting with someone. She knows it's going to be an hour-long meeting with me. And, we're talking about the same things. So as a supervisor, you may need to break it down a little bit more. And that doesn't mean that you don't think they can do the job. It doesn't mean that you are talking down to them. It may mean you have to take that list and make it a little more detailed. This task should take X amount of minutes. And did you check on A, B, C, D when you were doing said task? So that doesn't speak to them not being able to do the job. It's just maybe they need a little bit more in their toolbox to do it. And if you can stock that toolbox with exactly what they need, then you're not going to have the stress of having to go back and redo any work or worry that they're feeling great, I did this, but then it was wrong. And then you have to give negative feedback. So I think that's just really important to remember. Everybody's different. It doesn't mean anybody is better or not as good. They just might need different things in order to succeed in the role.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Could you guys just tell us a little information about your internship opportunities?
I'll let Rachel take that one.
Was the question asking about internship opportunities?
Yes.
Awesome. Yes. So we hire interns in the spring for what we call, even though busy season is year round, historically in the tax world, busy season, January through April is when we have one class of interns come in. This year we had 60, I think we're up to 69 or 70 that are joining us in the spring. The class just keeps growing. So we have interns for audit, all of our practices. So we have government compliance and labor, we have healthcare tax exempt, and we have commercial under our audit umbrella. Then we have tax. You do taxes, it's awesome. And then we also have SBA, which is our small business advisory. And that's kind of a wonderful marriage between tax and audit. We work with small businesses with revenue anywhere, from the lower end up to $25 million. So we also do bookkeeping services, strategic advising, growth plans. So we bring in that class of interns for busy season. And then we also have a summer internship program, and that runs from June through August. And we have 9 different offices at the Bonadio Group, mostly in New York, but we do have an office in Vermont and also one in Dallas. So who knows where other offices might be popping up. And we, of course, have our wonderful New York City office, which I have yet to visit in person, but I'm very excited to. So for 2022, we are technically full for internship spots. However, we will be interviewing and having our traditional fall recruitment for all of 2023 this fall. So August, September, October, we will have our postings on Handshake, any other additional platforms. You can apply right on our website if you're interested, but it's great hands-on experience, and everything that our interns have told me, because I get to talk to them not only through the whole process, but also at the very end, they can give me their honest feedback. They're just astounded by how much work they actually get to do. They're not fetching coffee. They're not watching other people do work. They're actually working shoulder to shoulder with partners. You are on a first name basis with the partners in the firm. And they've had just glowing things to say when they didn't have to say glowing things. And they're looking to me for their future offers, once they've finished their 150 credit hours and they're ready to take their CPA exams, can I come work at Bonadio full time? So I am happy. I will drop my information into the chat, and please feel free. I know you can email me, you can call me if you have additional questions about what the internship program entails.
Thank you so much for sharing. Does anybody else have any other questions? Any other feedback from anybody? And make sure to get Rachel's email from the chat box if you're interested.
Yeah, I'm gonna put so Rachel just per her email, I'm gonna drop my email in there as well. And feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much.
Thank you guys for coming. We had a great start to our first meeting with firm for 2022. And we thank you guys for coming out. If that's all, I'm gonna just share the screen again for our QR code. But if that's it, thank you guys so much for attending our meeting this week. And make sure to connect with Rachel and Michael on LinkedIn. And I think that's it.
Thank you for having us. It was great to be with you, present to you, and I look forward to connecting with some of you too.
Thank you so much.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.